Morning. Welcome to Schmooze with Suze. I'm Susie. So I'm going to start off by warning you this could be a little touchy and controversial. And if you would like to step away from the vehicle, now is your opportunity. I'm a little bit of a hot mess mama this morning. Couple reasons. One, I had to get my kids up extremely early to take my son to the ENT. He has some ENT issues. And I am very lucky that I have health insurance, that we can afford the medication, that I have the availability to have a flexible schedule that I can take him to the doctor when he needs to go. So, there's a couple things that I want to talk about, and all of them will wrap up into a nice neat bow at the end. But in the meantime, I will warn you there are a couple of touchy subjects about to come your way. The first one is something I posted about the other day on my social media. I had expressed that what could be considered an unpopular opinion is the comparison by extremists of the border crisis and the immigrant horror show is like the Holocaust compared to concentration camps, compared to Nazi Germany, and it offends me. Let me give you a little background. I am the first person in my family born in this country. All four of my grandparents were Auschwitz survivors. Both of my grandfathers had wives and children before the war. Both of my grandfathers had their wives and children murdered in front of their eyes. Both my grandmothers were young women. They all came from large families with double-digit siblings and left with 2 or 3 siblings, if that. Parents killed, grandparents killed, cousins killed, nieces, nephews. They left with the clothing on their backs, whatever they were liberated in, and they went back to Romania. From there, my father's family came to the U.S. by way of Italy, and my mother's family went to Israel. But I am the first one born here in the United States, on my mother's side. So, for me, any kind of comparison of a Holocaust type of situation to anything that is not a genocide that does currently, sadly, unfortunately, horrifically exist in parts of this world is going to rub me the wrong way. It is taking a situation that is a level 8, if we want to call it that, and turning it into a level 10. And how do I know this? Because the level 10 was forcing people by beatings and at gunpoint to dig giant pits and then line them up on the perimeter of those pits and shoot them in the head so that pits would become mass graves. And this could be done in front of their children and families. So that's a level 10. We're not at a level 10. We're not even at a level 7. And I'm not concerned that in the United States, we're going to become the level 10. I really don't think that we're going to get to a point where they're just blankly shooting at people. I understand that people are sensitive to this, but there's a very different dynamic between being ripped out of your bed, in your home, in the country that you're born in, where you live with your family for multiple generations, being put on transport trains, taken to a concentration camp where you are stripped naked, shaved in your entirety from head to toe, and then lined up and sent either to a work line or to a gas chamber to be killed. So there's a difference, and so that upsets me. So, talk about the next topic that upsets me, and literally is one that has kept me up the last 2 nights. I have a lovely neighbor across the street, Susan, and she posted in our community Facebook group that she was collecting for the mission in downtown Jacksonville where she volunteers, the homeless mission. She specifically asked for bras because that was something that was necessary. And as most women know, we tend to keep bras that we don't need longer than we need to. We have sports bras that are stretched out or too tight, depending on which way we grow. We have regular bras that we bought and they were expensive, and so we don't want to part with them even if we don't wear them because they don't fit right, either because of weight gain, weight loss, or just aging in my case, or 2 children. In any event, I collected bags of bras and I brought them over to her home, and I asked her, what else? What else do you need? And she told me socks and blankets. And something I'm going to share with you about myself is that my dad and my uncle and my mom and my aunt also worked for the business, were one of the first housing providers for the homeless population in New York City. In the 80s, a large portion of the homeless population were suffering from AIDS, in the 90s as well. And then with time, it just became a bigger and bigger crisis, the homelessness in New York City. When I was in my early 20s, my dad took ill and I volunteered to help him as an intern. And after a number of years, I became the director of several homeless shelters, a few that were SROs, single room occupancy, and a few that were family shelters where people with children lived. So the homeless population is something I'm also very sensitive to. And what I can say is that one of the issues that we have is that while we have a blanket that can last for a decade or more because of our washing machines and because of dry cleaners and because we live in clean homes, that we are blessed to have a roof over our head, for the homeless population, they're not so fortunate. They do not have access to washing machines the same way, which means that a blanket that they wrap themselves in the cold, or they sleep on the ground, in the streets, in parks, on benches, wherever they can find a spot out of the way, is used until it is no longer usable, and then it gets thrown away. And so when I say I was up all night last night, same with the socks, it was thinking, who do I know who has a laundromat that they would be willing to open one day a week or one day every 2 weeks so that homeless people could come and wash their clothing or their blankets? Do I know anyone? Do you know anyone? And if you do, please private message me or comment and let me know how I may be able to get in touch with them, or you can just send them my information to get in touch with me. But I'm willing to volunteer a day every time there's an opportunity to help people that need to use laundry services. Okay, so we covered immigrants, we covered Holocaust, we covered homelessness. Another population that I'm particularly sensitive to is the foster children. I have a lot of friends who are adopted, and I have friends who have adopted, and I have friends who foster, to adopt or foster, because children after a certain age really do need homes to stay in. They can't just be in foster care indefinitely or in perpetuity in kids' shelters. And so I, several years ago, was the director of an early childhood center, a preschool, where we worked with the foster population. We were one of the few places that would open our doors and accept children that were transient and accept whatever the minimum subsidy that the state provides is for educating these children or for giving care to these children so their foster families could continue to work. And I got to know families, I got to know children, and I'm a very interested party in what happens to the foster care population. So we covered Holocaust, we covered homelessness, and we covered the foster care. Something else that ties it all together is Jewish Family and Community Services. So here in Jacksonville, where I live, there's an amazing organization, a foundation, JFCS, Jewish Family and Community Services. By no means do they serve only the Jewish population. In fact, they mostly serve the greater Jacksonville and Duval County population. They provide the largest foster care or foster to adopt services. They have a food pantry. They have a clothing closet for families in need. They also supply clothing to foster children, foster families who need to clothe foster children. They provide Holocaust education. They have a Holocaust Memorial Gallery and Museum that you can visit to see whatever exhibit they're currently showing, which is dynamic, the rescuers. It doesn't even talk about the people who were in the concentration camps, but really focuses on the incredible people who risked their lives to save people in dire straits. So, what does this have to do with anything? Why am I up at night? I went to Jewish school for my entire life till I left to college. And I studied Talmud. There's a passage in the Talmud in Aramaic that says, Anye ircha kadma. The poverty-stricken in your city come first. I will say, I do not condone violence against anybody. I definitely do not condone any kind of retaliation or violence against people trying to escape for safety reasons or asylum. I also want to say that we have a strong responsibility to take care of Anye Ircha Kadma, our own poverty-stricken, our own downtrodden, our own people in need in our own cities first, before we can open up borders randomly. We have to be responsible for our veterans. We have to be responsible for our homeless population. I'm not talking about just inner cities. I'm talking about a large percentage of the United States that lives below the poverty line. When I lived up in the Adirondacks, I remember meeting families with children who didn't have shoes or coats when it was below freezing from October to May. It snowed from October to May. And I would collect and buy coats, and I would buy school supplies and shoes and boots for children here in our country whose parents were working. They were in the agricultural industry. They were farmers, and they lived below the poverty level. We have a responsibility to foster care, foster children. There are so many children who need homes, who can't be homed for whatever reason. There are foster children with healthcare needs that are tragic. We have so many people here at home that we have to take care of. I warned you this was going to be potentially unpopular, but I also feel that we have to do things to make this happen. So, the bow at the end. JFCS, Jewish Family and Community Services. Volunteer, support, donate, be the change that you wish to see in the world. Actually go and do those things. I am trying to visit Holocaust survivors and bring them food every other week. I am committing myself and my students to volunteering at the clothing closet that helps foster children and foster families, and the food pantry that I've been told is now not just for foster families, either of those organizations, but they're seeing a surge in the homeless population as well. I'm not saying that I'm great at all. I'm saying that I'm affected. And so if I have to choose what to be affected by, these are my choices. This is what means a lot. This is what's personal to me. This is what hits home. And I encourage and urge you to do the same. So, thank you for watching. See you next time.